Hey guys, so today I'm going to be playing around with React hooks. So React 16.8 was released with hooks, which are an additional feature that allows us to use state and other React features without writing a class. So if you've worked with React before, you should know that if you want to use state in your component, you have to use classes. Well, that's not necessarily the case anymore. Now you can have state in your functional components using something called useState. So to get started, we're going to create a new React app using create React app. So let's head over to the Git repo so we can copy the commands from there. So I'm just going to create my new application using this command, and I'm going to call it my React to-do list. Okay, this command is going to generate my project. After that, I'm going to open it in Visual Studio Code. You can use any code editor of your choice. Open it in here. So we're going to put most of our code in this file. So I'm going to start by removing all of this. I'm not going to use this. I'm not going to use this. And I'm going to copy some classes that I've already written here. And just replace the CSS. The first thing I want to do is to change this into a function. So this will be function app, and we're already exporting it down here. We don't need a render. This is just a pure function which returns our JSX. Okay, so now we're going to import useState from here. I'm going to create a constant. So the way useState works is it gives us two values. The first one is the one that holds the records like an array of to-dos, and the second one is the method we use to update the state or the data, which is our to-dos list. So the first one will be to-dos, which will be the array, and I'm gonna have set to-dos here. So this would work like in our previous React components. We would do something like this dot state dot to dos, and this will be this dot set state. So don't be confused by this syntax. This is just the structuring. Okay, so here we're going to use state, and we're just going to pass an array of to-dos which we are going to map later on. So for example, we have something like text, which is like maybe buy groceries, and we have a boolean is done, which is false by default. And I'm just gonna copy this and repeat it down here. Sorry. Maybe we have three initial to-dos. This one I'll call it go to the gym. Maybe this one is pay credit card bill. Okay, so now that we have this data, we just want to map it down here. So I'm just gonna create a title first here. Call this to-do list. And then I'm gonna use a map function to loop through my to-dos array. To-dos.map. And right here, I'm gonna structure again this to-do object. And what I need inside is the text and my boolean. And down here, I'm gonna return a div which I'm gonna give a class name, which is list item. And here, I'm gonna have a span, which is going to hold my text. And I'll have a button which I'll use to update this boolean. So the text for this button is going to be dependent on this boolean is done. So I'm going to call this, I'm going to create a variable called btn text. It will be a dynamic text. So I'm going to check if it's done is true, then the text will be undo, otherwise the text will be done. If we save this and check in our browser, let's run the app first. I'm going to do yarn start to run the app. Okay, you should have something like this. So for now, clicking on these buttons does nothing. If we check inside our console, we should have an error which says each child in a list should have a unique key. So we need to pass this index here, so we get rid of that error. So this will be key is equal to index. So the next thing we want to do is we want to create a form to add to this list of to-dos. So to do that, I'm just going to create another component up here, which is another pure function. I'm going to call this function add to do form, and this function will accept another function which is called add to do, and we're going to do exactly the same thing that we did down here for us to get the value of the input. So I'm going to create a const, and I'll call this text, and this is going to be called set text. So as you can see, you can name this anything you want. I'm going to use text here and pass in an initial value of nothing, and down here I'm going to return my form, and I'm just going to add a label here. Down here I'll have a div which contains my input. Let's just give this a class name. I'll call it to do input, and a placeholder. I'm just gonna write start typing. I'm gonna have an onChange text event, and we're gonna set our text here, which is event.target.value, and the value of our input is this text. So now we want to do something. When the user clicks on the submit form, we want to add to this to-do list. So to do that, I'm just going to create a function up here. I'm going to call it submit to do. Takes in the event. I'm going to do event.prevent default to stop the default behavior of the form, because if I don't add this, it's going to refresh the page when I click submit. So now I'm going to check if we have a text. I'll call this function add to do, which takes in a text, and I'll clear my input box. Otherwise I'll just show a simple error message and let value is required. So I'm going to use this function on submit, and I'll call my form down here inside my main component, which is the app function, and I'm just going to call the component here. So inside this component we need to pass this add to do function, which is going to do the adding to our list right here. So I'm just going to create a function here called add to do, which will take in the text, and again I'll use set to do's to update the state, which is our previous to-do list plus the new text which we are adding right now, and we pass it here as props. So if we go here, we have our input box, and if I type something, buy bread, Oh, sorry, I forgot to add the button. So inside our form we need to add a button. I'm just gonna add a submit button right here. Okay, so I come here and I add my text, submit, and now we have a new to-do list. So if I click on done, nothing happens yet. So let's go ahead and fix that. Okay, so let's start by creating a function to mark the to-dos as complete. So I'm gonna create a constant here and I'm gonna call it toggle to-do status. And this will take a payload. So what is going to be in this payload? I'm gonna add an on click function here. So when you click this function, I'm gonna pass the status, which is the opposite of this boolean. So if it's true, it will pass in false. If it's false, it will pass in true. Then I'm also gonna pass the index or the position of this object in the array that we are updating. Oh, sorry, I wrote this in the wrong place. This should be down here. Should be here. So I'm gonna destructure this payload, take the status and the index from the payload. Okay, and I'm gonna create a new variable here called my new to-dos, which is equal to to-dos. So to update the status, I'm gonna do my new to-dos and the index of the object that we want to update. Dot is done, and I'm gonna set it to equal the status which we are passing in the payload. And then I'm going to update the state using set to dos. So my new to-do list will be this. So for us to be able to see the change, I'm gonna add some class names here. On the span, I'm gonna add a class name to strike through and change the color. So if this is true, I'm gonna add a class name called strike through. Otherwise, I'll leave it blank. And I'll also add a class name here. Start with the default class name, which is status button, and I'll add another class here. If it's done, the class name will be done. Otherwise, I'll leave it blank. Okay, let's test it out. So if I come back here, I can add another to-do list, submit, click done, it's crossed out, click undo, it gets back to normal. So there's no persistence here because we don't have a database. So when we refresh our page, the new to-do that we added gets lost. So that's it. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.